We've seen in Kenya in recent years some very major reforms being enacted with the goal of attracting more private investment for large-scale water and sanitation infrastructure, and particularly around water resources infrastructure and dams. The intention of these reforms is fairly ambitious. There's a huge gap to cover, both in terms of delivery and in terms of funding. But PPPs remain very controversial. The interesting thing, of course, is that PPPs can take many forms, from management contracts and leases to full-scale concessions to long-term investment-heavy PPPs, build, operate, train, and transfer type models. But quite often we talk about PPPs as if they were one thing. And quite often they're talked about by people who are either very pro-PPPs or very anti-PPPs. And there's quite a lot of controversy around PPPs and some fairly entrenched positions around it. But as with many of these things, the reality is more nuanced and more complex, and that's what we're going to try and explore this afternoon. Risks of corruption can emerge at any stage of a PPP, from how they're selected and structured through to how contracts are implemented and monitored. And these risks have real long-term consequences on sector finances, on service quality, ultimately on the realization of the human rights to water and sanitation, and on water security.
Firstly, I should say up front that we are in the midst of major reforms of the water services sector in South Africa, but the main driver of those reforms is not to enable PPPs. That's not our main motivating reason. Our main motivating reason is to improve the performance of the sector. But the reforms are going to create a much more enabling environment for PPPs to happen. Most of the municipal wastewater treatment systems are in a poor or critically poor condition and polluting the environment and polluting communities. And we find that the main reasons for this deteriorating performance is municipalities not hiring people with the correct staff, related to that, not following standard operating processes for drinking water systems and wastewater treatment. Secondly, on top of the revenues not being ring-fenced, most of the municipalities have very high non-revenue water. The average for the country in terms of our last no-drop report was almost 50% non-revenue water. Then, because of that, the service levels deteriorating, non-revenue water increasing through leaks, so it's a vicious downward cycle. Now, there's increasing consensus in the national government in South Africa that there are institutional causes at the root of all of this. This is how most municipalities are structured. Water is a technical department in a municipality, and the head of water does not have control over and responsibility for many of the key functions related to providing the service. The water department gets a budget every year, which is unrelated to how much revenue is collected from the sale of water. Usually they have no control over recruitment, which is managed elsewhere in the municipality, or procurement, which is managed elsewhere in the municipality, or the customer relationship. I think generally between ourselves and the National Treasury and the Presidency, there's a consensus that in order to manage the risk of procurement, we need procurement reforms where we have much more transparency in the procurement process, but also there's a need to professionalize the procurement function. They should have professionalized the procurement management. The senior people should be members of professional associations. They should stand to lose their professional membership if they found guilty of corruption, just like medical doctors or professional engineers. Professionalization is key, and then creating increased transparency around the procurement processes.
Now, from the civil society perspective, is that the fundamental obligation remains with the state. But this obligation to observe, respect, and fulfill the human rights to water does not change and is not transferable. That responsibility remains with the state. And at the center of this is the need to uphold good governance and regulation as a core strength of whichever form of service delivery that would be. What are these non-negotiables that we bring on the table And this would include issues to do with accountability, for example, and that the private sector actors must be able to comply to the standards of the human rights standards that have already been defined. But we should also be able to co-develop performance matrices, which by which we are able to measure the duty bearer, the state. And finally, also to ensure that we use the existing frameworks, legal frameworks as it is, to push for integrity issues like transparent contracting, financial reporting, and disclosure of service level agreements, most of which are normally hidden from the public view. And
there are several reasons why it is like that. One, it is the lack of expertise in the water sector. Expertise in the sense the engineers, the economists, the lawyers, and others who are working in the water sector, who knows how to handle, to design how to deal with PPP. That is one. And because of this first reason, the second reason comes in the misconception. We have not done very well when it comes to privatization in the country. And hence, when you talk of PPP, people misconstrue and think this is another way of privatization, where it came with people being redundant, out of work, and the like. So it has not been very palatable to the public utilities. We need to have credible, trusted data, because for a regulation that is twofold, that is a technical regulation, but economic regulation, you need to have credible, trusted data. That is very key. But you need also to have expertise that are going to carry out the procurement appropriate, because the PPP, engagement of a PPP is a procurement issue. And once you have people with expertise to carry out the procurement, then you are very safe, because sometimes the issue of integrity comes in because of lack of knowledge, and therefore it becomes easy for people to get compromised.
In 2024, Post International conducted a global survey across construction sector players, including contractors, consulting engineers from 15 countries in Africa and Latin America. 47% are worried about delays, and 2/3 questioned how consistently rules and anti-corruption measures are applied. In summary, there is a lot of uncertainty both about process and performance. We looked at sector performance and ethics. Around 40% of the respondents say they think design and construction quality is adequate, and half of them believe quality control tools exist. However, the open-ended comments told a deeper story, including issues around low price bidding, bribery, poor supervision, and substandard materials were major concerns highlighted. And while 70% of the respondents of the firms have codes of conduct, only 16% say ethics training is adequate. Our conclusion on sector performance and ethics is that integrity exists on paper, but not always in practice. The key takeaway from this is that training, both technical and ethical, is critically lacking. The conversation should be around rebuilding trust, having good quality data, and strengthening the capacity of both players. Integrity in the water sector isn't just about preventing corruption. It's about building trust, enabling innovation, and ensuring every drop of investment delivers value for people on the planet.